Hello and welcome to part 2 of our Nurturing the Teenage Brain course. This part of the course is divided into 3 parts and is focused on your relationship with your teenager. Having been through it ourselves, we all know how challenging it can be being a teenager. This key stage in our development brings with it many obstacles and adjustments as we try and navigate our way through the development of our own identity and sense of self, our separation from our parents, and working out who we want to be in our adult life. Perhaps now more than ever, our teenagers are negotiating a complex and frankly sometimes quite intrusive world, whether that's the internal world of their brains and their emotions, or the external world of relationships, learning, or communication through engagement in social media. As a parent of a teenager, one of your key roles is to support their navigation through this as smoothly as possible, balancing their need for increasing independence with your need to still feel in control, and encouraging them towards their adult life with good health, safe behaviour, and resilience to manage the bumps in the road that will inevitably come their way. As a parent, one of the important ways you can provide them with many of the key skills to achieve this is through what you offer them in your relationship. In this lesson, I want to help you as a parent to understand more about the importance of relationships for your teenager, and to consider how we can use these to support their progression through the adolescent years and safely into adulthood. We'll think about their relationship with you and consider how it has changed and continues to change over their childhood, as well as think about their development of relationships with others and how these equally inform and shape the person that they become. And then we'll end with sharing some strategies to help you to apply this understanding to your relationship with your teenager. So, why are relationships so important? Well, first and foremost, we are all born biologically predisposed to form relationships with others. This begins with the development of what we call an attachment relationship with our caregivers as a newborn infant. We are biologically programmed to form this close and continuous bond with our caregiver because of the connection between this and our survival and protection. So as tiny babies and beyond, we need the experience of a relationship in which we're kept safe and are offered all that is necessary for us to survive. And this, hopefully, comes from our attachment relationship. This first experience of a relationship then importantly provides us with a template that we use for our subsequent relationships. It allows us to create what we call an internal working model or belief system. This system teaches us about what we should feel, think, and expect of ourselves so that we are lovable, likeable, we're deserving of being looked after, and that we can cope with challenges that are thrown at us. It also teaches us what we should think, feel, and expect from others, that they can care for us and be responsive to our needs, that they're going to look after us and offer us safety and protection, and that they'll be available to us when we need them to be. And finally, what we should think, feel, and expect about the world around us, that it is generally a safe place to be, although obviously danger does exist within it. We then use these beliefs and thoughts to drive how we conduct ourselves within future relationships and what we should be able to expect from those. Of course, sadly, the first experiences of such relationships are not always like that, and it's important for us to acknowledge this. There are many babies and children who are born into worlds that are not safe and do not offer them the protection and opportunities for survival that they need. However, in this lesson today, we're going to focus on those times when children and babies are offered a safe and healthy start in life. So, how do our attachments change over our childhood? Attachments form in the first place through repeated, predictable, and consistent interactions with our primary caregiver, the person who's looking after us the most. Through having a caregiver who can accurately, as much as possible, and sensitively perceive and interpret the signals from their baby, and then select and implement an appropriate response that meets their need in that moment, we not only have the opportunity to experience this close bond, but within this context, we also develop critical life skills and begin to create our personalities. Life skills that include things like developing trust in others, building confidence in our own ability to meet our needs as we get older, and regulating our emotional states because we've firstly been co-regulated by our attachment figure. This relationship is not fixed, however, and we may notice as our children are getting older how this changes. We start our lives as babies being wholly dependent on those caring for us, but not being particularly selective about who they are as long as they're keeping us safe and they're meeting our needs. And we see this in our babies seeming to be quite content being passed around at the family gathering and being offered a bottle by whoever is willing to provide it. As our children reach around 3 to 6 months of age, they develop the ability to actively seek out attention from others, and they also develop selectivity and preference for their closest caregivers. So again, we see this in the protest displayed by our babies at this age when they're passed around but will perhaps only be really settled with mum or dad. As our babies age further, between 6 months and about 2 years, their attachments consolidate and they become increasingly wary of strangers. At this age, we really see what we call their attachment behaviours, clinging to you when someone unfamiliar comes to the house, or perhaps running to you with a hurt knee when they've fallen. Between this age and adolescence, our children are really developing their autonomy and are having to learn about and experience separations from us, whether this is to attend nursery or school, going on play dates, or perhaps even staying with relatives. By this point, however, they've hopefully internalised the sense of safety that your relationship provides for them, and they're able in the main to manage these times of separation. By the time they then reach the teenage years, our children's attachment relationships have created a solid blueprint from which they can continue to not only separate from us, but also transfer their bonds away from us as their parents, outwardly towards their peers, and eventually within their romantic relationships. Importantly, this is not to say that our teenagers no longer need that attachment with us as their parents. In fact, that need never goes away, and you may notice this at times of maybe increased stress or distress for you, when you perhaps still turn to your own parents for comfort, protection, or reassurance. So why is thinking about our teenagers' early relationships with us important in understanding their behaviour now? So you may recall me saying earlier that attachment experiences not only provide us with a template for our future relationships, but they also teach us valuable life skills such as emotion regulation, self-belief and confidence, as well as forming our personalities. In order to understand this better, we need to think about the attachment strategies that our teenager is using within their relationships. What I mean by this is that we all unconsciously organise our behaviours as babies and young children in response to what our attachment relationships look like and offer us, so that we can ensure that we get our needs met. The different ways in which we do this is referred to as our attachment strategy. So you may have heard people talking about being securely attached or insecurely attached, meaning that we've either been given a well-balanced experience within our attachment relationships so that we become well-balanced adults, or we've been given a variation on this experience, which then means we've needed to organise our behaviours a little differently. When this happens, we may develop strategies such as being very compliant, a people pleaser, putting the needs of others before our own in order to make sure we're getting it right for them, but perhaps to the expense of meeting our own needs and expressing our own emotions. Or rather than suppressing our feelings, we might exaggerate them and show them in more expressive ways so that people are very aware of what our needs are. There's no right or wrong strategy as such. We need individuals to be using all types of strategies for our society and cultures to work. However, it can be helpful to reflect on what strategies we as parents use, as well as those our teenagers do, in order to best understand the dynamics that are created when we all come together in a family. It's also helpful to think about how our teenagers' strategy plays out in their behaviours, whether that's within our relationship with them or perhaps in their relationship with others. So, for example, are they the star pupil at school who never gets into trouble or makes mistakes? Do they always do as you ask them to do at home with no apparent resistance to that? Do they always do what their friends ask them to do, even if this is something that maybe they're not comfortable with, but they do so in order to make them more popular? Or are they always getting into trouble at school for maybe challenging their teacher, speaking out of turn in class? Do they slam doors? Do they shout? Do they have the teenage equivalent of a toddler tantrum when something doesn't perhaps go quite their way? Do they have friendships maybe that seem quite volatile, quite full of drama? Or maybe they do a bit of all of these things. And then what do you do in response to them as their parent? Do you find yourself maybe suppressing your own needs and feelings in order to always meet their needs? Or maybe never challenging them in order to keep the peace? Or maybe you find it hard not to explode when they haven't tidied their bedroom, for example. Or hard not to take responsibility sometimes for when things go wrong in your relationship with your teenager. Or again, maybe you do a bit of all of these things. As we can see, each strategy we use is going to play out in different ways in our behaviour. And as our teenager becomes more autonomous and independent, moving away from us towards their peers, the strategy that we've created in them from those early experiences we gave them as babies will be shaping how they interact with their friends and eventually with their loved ones as adults. So how do our teenagers' relationships relate to their mental health? We're learning that relationships provide so much to our teenagers. They give them a sense of safety and protection, they provide valuable life skills, and they inform the strategies that they use to organise their behaviour in order to get their needs met. As well as all of this, they can also be the cause or the cure to challenges with their emotional well-being, as the experience of relationships informs that internal belief system that they hold about themselves, others, and the world around them that we talked about earlier. Perhaps more than ever this is true when we take into account the pressures and pleasures of engaging in a world that offers us new and often complex experiences of relationships. Perhaps relationships with people they're never going to meet face to face because they live on the other side of the world. Or maybe with people they cannot escape from because they're being cyberbullied. From those early attachment relationships that can protect and build resilience if healthy, or can feel critical and even hostile if less healthy, through to the ongoing relationships with peers that can enhance a positive self-esteem or self-worth or destroy it in equal measure. Relationships really are the cornerstone of our teenagers' emotional well-being. And this is perhaps particularly true during this period of development, when you probably see your teenager measuring much of who they are by how many friends they have, whether they're real or virtual, or how many likes they have on Instagram, meaning they either feel great about themselves or begin to experience signs of perhaps social anxiety, stress, or even depression and suicidal thoughts. If we have managed to already help our teenager to learn that they are lovable, likeable, and are deserving of good relationships, then we can hope that they will make good choices in respect of the relationships they choose in the future, whether these are their platonic friendships or their more intimate relationships. They will have the skills to keep themselves safe in these relationships and will make choices that further enhance their well-being and emotional health, rather than seeking out or associating with those who damage it. Similarly, if we as parents can continue to offer our teenagers a positive model of a relationship moving forwards, in which we offer them understanding, connection and acceptance, and support them with those challenges they face over the coming years, we can hopefully mitigate against some of the negative impacts of those challenges and keep them in good mental well-being. So this brings us on to what you can do as a parent to shape your teenager through their relationships. Firstly, we can't turn back the clock on our parenting, so please don't beat yourself up for not always getting it right for them when they were babies. None of us do, even when we know all of this stuff. And you probably didn't back then, because this is not something we're taught about when we become parents. I certainly wasn't when I became a parent for the first time. Secondly, hold in mind that whatever relationship you've had with your teenager in the past, there is always space and time to make changes. These may be perhaps minor tweaks, or they may be major shifts. Either way, it's never too late to apply new knowledge and understanding to your relationship with your teenager. Our next lesson will go into more detail about how we can parent our teenagers in ways that hold in mind the importance of our relationship with them and the importance of connection with them. However, a good thing to always remember as a parent, and I certainly try to do this, is that when we do get things wrong for them, because we all do, because being a parent is a really hard thing, we can always repair it afterwards. We can admit to them that we're sorry for shouting when we shouldn't have. We can say that we made the wrong decision and it was our responsibility that things didn't turn out as we hoped or had expected. We can let them know that we still love them, even at times when they're driving us completely crazy and taking us to the end of our tether. We can acknowledge that they are feeling or thinking things that might be different to how we are feeling or thinking, but that's okay. We're not judging them for that. It's just because we're all different. And we can remind them that we know that they are still a really good person, even when they make the mistakes that they're going to make in the coming years. Next, if we want our teenager to make changes to their behaviour, we can use our relationship with them to convey the idea of connection before correction to do so. This means being curious with them about their behaviour. So do they have any ideas where it came from, why they did it, what they were trying to communicate through their behaviour? We can do this by listening to and hearing what they have to say in response to your curiosity, with acceptance rather than judgment, and offering them empathy and acceptance around where the behaviour may have come from. This is not, by the way, acceptance of the behaviour, as this is what you're wanting to change. If we can offer this to our teenagers, they're then going to be more open to the conversation that follows, which is the correction part of that conversation, leading them into thinking about how they might be able to behave or manage a situation better or differently in the future. And they will then be more open to this because you've given them an experience of your understanding of them first. Finally, I would suggest using those other parents around you for advice and comfort at times of particular challenge in your relationship with your teenager. Sometimes hearing how others are managing situations and sharing advice or solutions, or being validated that your relationship is perhaps no different to many others, is just what we need as parents to be reassured that we are doing our best and that our best is good enough. So hopefully this has offered you some thoughts and ideas on how your relationship with your teenager can help them to navigate the journey towards establishing independence and forming their adult identity. We're very mindful that for some of you, your relationship with your teenager may be ticking along quite nicely, with the need for just some minor adjustments to maximise how positive and effective an influence this can be on them. Whereas for others, you may be feeling that the relationship with your teenager has completely broken down and there's no hope for this being rebuilt in the future. Parenting is an incredibly hard thing to get right, and this is no more true than during these teenage years, when their very normal attachment needs mean that they do need to distance themselves from you. They need to rebel against you and at times even be quite rejecting of you. Hold on in there. I hear it from others in the know that they do eventually come back to you. And remember that by signing up to this course, you're already proving to yourself and to your teenager that you're wanting to understand them better and do the best that you can for them. And remember still that your best is good enough. As with our previous lessons, if you feel comfortable doing so, please share any of your observations, experiences or thoughts with us in the comments. We'd love to hear about your experiences with your teenager and how you're finding these lessons help you to understand and relate to them better. Thanks for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.